All right, welcome everyone. I'm just waiting, making sure it looks good on on YouTube. Yes, so we are live. Welcome. My name is Cap, and I am the Developer Community Manager at Sanity. Thank you everyone for joining us for this virtual meetup. We like doing these. We like bringing the community members on stage and showing off the cool things that they're building, but also a way to connect with all of you and make sure that we're keeping things alive and keeping in touch with everyone. So we're glad that you're all here. And yeah, so I wanted to know where everyone is joining from. So if you can put in the chat, but if you notice, the chat is disabled. So we are actually going to have our chat be in the so we used to do this last year, but we're going to have the chat be in slack.sanity.io, our Slack community, and it's in the hashtag meetup channel. I'm going to go wave. Knut's waving as well. So yeah, if you can go meet us at slack.sanity.io in the hashtag meetup channel, that is where we are going to have our chat. We've found it's actually like really fun there because you can like respond in threads and throw around emojis and adding GIFs and stuff. But yeah, that's where we're going to have the chat. So let me know where you're joining from. I am joining from Colorado. It is nice and sunny here today. And yeah, let me know where you're joining in from. We have Oslo. Hi, Martin. We have Oakland from Knut. We have Chattanooga, Tennessee from Blake. Blake, does that mean that you saw the full eclipse yesterday? I don't know. Denmark, right on. Yeah. Welcome everyone. Let me know where you're joining from. And yeah, you can find the chat at the meetup channel. So I like to do a little like game while we go in between speakers. And the first one I'm going to do, so it's like a question, and then you just go and like answer the question or put your vote in or whatever. So last meetup was the day before Valentine's, so I did a lot of like love themed questions. But today there's no like theme that I have, but it's all like sanity themed, I guess. So describe sanity using one emoji, and I'm going to put that in the chat. But if you could describe sanity with one emoji, what would you use? And just put it right in the right on the thing. Mine is the chef's kiss, because whenever I like use sanity, I'm like, ooh, that was good. That was really good. So yeah, describe sanity with one emoji. It's in the chat. And yeah, so let's go over our agenda for today. So we are going to have, first we're going to have Alyssa. Alyssa is the creator of the Simpler Color Input plugin. So she's going to give us a great behind the scenes of all that and adding color to your content. Very excited for that one. Then our second speaker is going to be Emma, who has done some really awesome deep customizations with the studio. And then our last speaker is Knut. You all know Knut probably, head of developer community and education at Sanity. And he will be speaking on TypeScript and Sanity. So at the end of every talk, we're going to have a Q&A section. And when the person is giving their talk, put all the questions that you have for them in the chat. And then during the Q&A, we will be answering those questions. All right, so let's bring our first speaker on stage. Let's bring Alyssa on stage. All right, hi, Alyssa.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. And you were in the eclipse path, correct? You were in.
I was. I'm in Cleveland, so we had like a total eclipse for
That's
3.5 minutes.
That's so cool. Yeah, I did not get to see that, so I'm very jealous of everyone who was in that path.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Right on. So we are going to give you the stage. You are speaking on the plugin that you created. We're very excited. And yeah, the stage is yours, Alyssa.
Cool. Thank you. Hello. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about adding color to your Sanity Studio with simpler color input and other plugins. So I'm just going to dive right in. So colors are used all across the web for all sorts of reasons. And kind of as an example, I want to use the Sanity website. So if we just like scroll through their homepage, you can see their different use of color. It's typically used on different websites to emphasize certain content or words or provide visual distinction between different areas on a page. So you can see here they're using like this red background color to kind of highlight the word content, or as you scroll, you can kind of see they use it to color this text, or different background colors for some of these different sections. And so I've been building websites for just over 10 years and just have kind of seen a lot of similar patterns used in terms of color, just some of the ones I'm pointing out with like the colors of different words, background colors. And so now I work as a freelance web designer and developer, and regularly use colors with my clients and in their websites. So I also use Sanity, and so I will be talking about the plugin I built to kind of help with adding color, kind of like you see, on their site. So even here, there's like red after this for the text color. So yeah, so Sanity uses it. Here's just some other well-known websites. Slack, you can see they use it even for like the text color here, or different background colors, or Figma here, they even do the text color. So it's used a lot across the web. And so I built this plugin for Sanity called Simpler Color Input almost a year ago. You can kind of see what it looks like here, but it basically allows you to easily add a color input field into the Sanity Studio. So here you can kind of see it in use. You can pick a custom color from a color palette or from a predefined list of colors. And so I initially kind of like diving into, what prompted me to do this. I actually initially built this as like a local component in just my own like client projects. It wasn't a plugin initially, and I had just been using it as like a local component. You can build like local Sanity input components. And so that's what I did. And I was using it for like a few months. And then I decided to release it as a plugin from just encouragement from other people who were looking for something similar. And so since then, it grew into the plugin that I launched a year ago. And then it grew even further just based on community feedback, things that were asked for, or even things that members of the community added themselves. So I'm going to kind of dive into the story of how it's evolved first, and then go into some of like the code behind the plugin so you can see how it works behind the scenes, and then talk about what else you can do with plugins in Sanity. So you can kind of see this little like timeline thing down here. That kind of shows like the different iterations that the plugin's been through that you'll see. So before I get into those different iterations, there were three main goals that I personally had when I built this in the first place. The first one was I needed a like restricted color list that I could have like my clients choose from. And Sanity has like their own color input plugin that they made. However, there was no way to like restrict it to a specific set of colors. There was always the ability to do like a custom color. And so that's honestly the main reason I initially built this, was to be able to do that. So you can use a color list and restrict it to that. You also saw in the previous thing that you can do custom colors as well. So that was the first goal. The second one was just a simple user interface. So here you can kind of see it kind of in a Sanity document in line with other input fields. So it doesn't take up too much space. And it's just very, simple. You don't see the different colors or anything until you click into it. I actually can't claim credit for the design of this. I had used a different content management system prior to Sanity, which I don't know if I should say the name of, but it starts with a C, and they had a color picker. And honestly, this design is very similar to theirs because I just really liked the way that it functioned. The third goal was that it would be simple to set up for developers to use. And so here you can kind of see what it looks like to use it. There's really two main steps once you install the NPM package. The first is adding it to the Sanity config, just like any other plugin. And then the second would be when you create a field, making it of type simpler color. And that's really all you have to do to get started with adding it to the project. There are like more additional customization options that you can do that you can kind of see here that we'll dive into, but you can specify like the color format, color list, or even enable search. So, but to start, you could totally just use it like this. So kind of diving into the evolution of it. So I launched this on June 1st of 2023. So under a year ago. And launched it. It was up on NPM and GitHub. I remember there was like an automated Slack message that sent in the Sanity Slack, which was cool about it. But yeah, that was kind of launch day, and this is what it looked like then. So initially it was a standalone input field that allowed for a color list if you wanted one, and or custom color picker. So here's, if you were to click on custom, what that color picker would look like. And yeah, this is what it was like when it launched, but very quickly I started getting people who in the community who were asking, well, what about an alpha slider? Like I want to be able to pick, change the opacity of the colors. So that was something I pretty quickly added just 6 days later, was an alpha slider to the color picker, which you can see here. Another one that was asked for pretty quickly was portable text support. That one took a little bit of time until I added it, but eventually I did. And so you can see here the portable text editor. And these two icons represent, this one is for text color and this one is for text highlight. And you can kind of see here, you can color text or highlight it or do both. And so I kind of made support for this and built the components so people can easily pull them into their own projects and use them in their portable text editor. So there was that. Kind of the next day, this is just an idea I had that I added, was default settings support. So initially you could only specify like settings for the color list or whatever in the actual field definition itself, as you can see here. And so you can imagine if you were using this field in several different documents, you would have to, with the same color list, you would have to duplicate code, which I'm all about keeping things as simple as possible. So I made it so that in the config file itself, you can specify default settings for everything. So you can have a default color list, and by default that applies, and you would be able to remove these options entirely unless for some reason you wanted to override the defaults. So that was November 8th, and then December 11th, I added color mode support, and this was also on request of someone in the community. But previously, that alpha slider I showed was turned on using this enable alpha Boolean. So you could say true or false, and they would turn it on. But when the data, this field, when you add it, it returns that data on your site for you to use. It was always being returned as I think a RGB or RGBA color or something like that. There was no way to change it if you wanted it returned as like a hex or a different format. And so basically this update changed that option so that you could specify any color format. So then if somebody picked a custom color in the picker, you could say, I want to receive this data. I want this data stored as an RGBA. So then if you didn't want the alpha picker, it'd just be RGB, or if you wanted a hex, it returned as a hex decimal, it would be you'd put hex here. So it supports a wide variety of color formats. I think those are the main ones that are used. I also learned that there's hex A is a color format, which is like a hex color with opacity. I didn't know that was a thing when I was adding this, but that was that update. And this was actually a breaking change for the plugin because I changed that setting. But here was another update based on a request somebody made. So previously there was this like clear button that showed all the time on the fields. But if the field was required, it didn't really make sense to show it. And so I removed that field if the field is required, because then, somebody who's editing content might clear the color, try to save it, and, realize they need to pick a color. So that was just making the UI simpler on January 6th of this year. And then the last main one was this search feature on February 5th of this year. And this one actually was not added by me. This was added by someone in the community. I guess he, uses this plugin at his job, and they have a bunch of colors that they, need this search to be able to search for what they're looking for. So that was really exciting, just seeing like the plugin grow and add a new feature through, someone else and not necessarily me needing to add it. And even just like this idea that, I don't know if I had the idea to add a search feature. So those were like the main iterations. There were also bugs along the way. So down here, you can see like the smaller icons here represent some of the bugs that happened. And then you can see here in GitHub some of the different issues that people reported. So yeah, there were bugs along the way that needed fixed as usual with code, but those were kind of like the evolution of the plugin into what it is today. I'm really happy with like how it's grown. I think like I built the plugin initially, but I really do think the Sanity community helped build it to, what it is today by giving, making requests or even adding them themselves. So that's the story. And then here are kind of just some stats from today. So you can see the downloads on NPM here have slowly grown. The high was earlier this year. They were around like 4,000 a week. It has 20 stars on GitHub. And then there are 3 humans that have contributed to it and 1 robot. So that's kind of where it's at today. Who knows where it will be at in the future. But let's take a look kind of behind the scenes and show you kind of how it's built. So I have the code open here. And so essentially, if you've never seen like the build for a Sanity plugin before, this is kind of what it looks like. To build this to start, I actually cloned Sanity's color input and kind of made changes to it. And they also have like a bunch of helpful documentation on their site. I know there's like a plugin kit thing too that they have for building plugins, but I personally, I just cloned their color input and like made changes to it because I knew mine would be similar. But yeah, in the package.json, you can kind of see some of the dependencies that I used for it. The different Sanity icon library, Sanity UI, and then React color. This is what I used for like the color picker. But the way this is kind of structured, so there's like a source folder, and inside that there's an index file. And this is basically like the gateway or entry point to the plugin. And so this kind of defines like, hey, this is what basically the different schema types that are available when somebody imports this plugin into their project. So there's the main one that I built it with, which is just the input field itself, and then after added the text color and highlight color for that portable text editor support. So this is just, yeah, kind of defining that structure so that when people import it into their project, you know, they know, like Sanity, their project agrees how to use it the right way. There's also these like schemas that kind of like define how they should use it in their like fields and kind of what the schema looks like for that. So the main one is this simpler color one. And so, yeah, it's an object based on this component, which I'll show, and these are kind of like the fields on it. So there's the label for the different colors and the value of the color. So that's kind of, yeah, where you do like the schemas. I'm like giving a very high level of this, but the other main files are just the component files for the color input itself, as well as the annotations for text color and highlight color for the portable text editor. So if you kind of look in the color input component itself, I'm not going to explain all of this, but the main things I want to point out are kind of just some of like the things I had to learn when building this plugin and like challenges that I personally had and what was new. Because this is like in React and like TypeScript, which is something I was like familiar with ahead of time. But there are things specific to Sanity plugins that I had to learn. And so the first one was kind of like, okay, what data is Sanity giving us from like the user? And that's kind of this like props object here. And so this was something I had to figure out and understand. And the main thing I used from it, which like you can click into this and see, they give you a lot of different information based on the user's actions. The main one like I had to understand was this like on change one. So this is what I had to call and use anytime a value, like somebody picks a color, because then when I call this, it will actually update like the Sanity data. And so I remember I was like, why, like when I refresh it, did the color not save or whatever? And it's because it hadn't actually updated in, you know, the person's Sanity data. So that was like one of the big things I had to learn when building this. Another thing was just like the different types, you know, associated with that, figuring out what the different TypeScript types were, because I decided to build this in TypeScript. And then the other big one was, so I wanted this to work with like the Sanity UI. And so Sanity provides like a component library called Sanity UI, like that. And so as much as possible, I wanted to use those components so that it would visually like fit in with that. Or if people theme their studio, those like theme changes would show up here. And so that was challenging since I had never worked with that before, just figuring out which elements to use, how to use them. But as you can see, kind of this is where the component is returned. I tried as much as possible to use their components rather than, you know, just like a normal div. So pretty much for all of this, I use their components besides for the actual like color picker itself. That was an external package. So yeah, feel free to open up GitHub and look at the code yourself. When I was building this, like I mentioned, I just cloned Sanity's color input. I also just looked at some of the other ones, like the typical like text input, which really just helped me like wrap my head around like how different plugins are structured, because this was the first like Sanity plugin I had built. I didn't know what I was doing. But yeah, that's that. And then I kind of talked about these as I was going into the code, but one of the challenges was just making sure that it fit in with the Sanity UI. So here's their like website. about Sanity UI and all the different components. But that was something that I had to figure out. And then the other one was just like bugs that came up after I had launched the plugin. So there was one that happened earlier this year that I knew about. But I just like had not had time to fix it. I was busy, with other things and just hadn't had a chance to look at it, and it had been like a couple weeks. And then I went into GitHub and realized that somebody had fixed it. So that was something really cool. And I think just powerful about having this be like an open source plugin is that this person had like went in, he actually updated this like plugin or this package that my plugin depended on. He fixed it there because that was where the issue was at, and then updated like simpler color input. So I was really grateful for that because personally, I like did not know how to fix this bug. I couldn't reproduce it on my own computer. And so I spent, I think, a little bit looking into it. And then I was like, I don't have time. And so that's when I came back a few weeks later and was just really happy that somebody had fixed it. But, bugs come up and you have to fix them. So in terms of learnings, I think I really learned through building this just the power of open source community and just how we were able to build it with their suggestions and also help in some ways. And also that it does take time and effort to build something like this because people are reporting issues or using it. And there's stuff you have to do. And there's not really like monetary pay that I get for building this, but it is rewarding to do. And I'm happy that other people are using something that, I use and thought would be helpful for me. Another thing is just that Sanity plugins aren't actually that hard to make. In general, it was a lot easier than I thought. And then the other one is that it doesn't have to be perfect for launch. I launched this with, a few features, and then you can see how it kind of grew. I think I had the idea for like the alpha slider when I launched it, but I was like, nah, I'm not going to use that myself. So I'm not going to add that right now. But it was good because it made it so I launched it sooner rather than delayed that. So kind of moving into the last part of this in the last few slides is just why plugins in general. So Sanity has like a bunch of different plugins that you can use. Simpler color input is just an input field, which Sanity has like, there's a bunch of other plugins for custom inputs, which is cool. There's also plugins for like integration with other tools like Google Analytics. And so I personally use like a handful of plugins in my projects to just solve problems that I have more quickly and more easily. A lot of these are built by the Sanity team themselves or built by like community members. And everyone has like different use cases for how they're using the Sanity Studio. And so having these like plugins to choose from just allows you to pull in, what you need to use. And it's really cool. Like if you want to scroll through and look at some of the different ones that are available, I was scrolling through it in prep for this talk and realized there was like a dad jokes one or like a cat one too. So there's some like fun random ones in there too, and also some helpful ones. But in terms of like, if you do find that there's not a plugin that you need and you want to make your own, it's easier than you might think. I like track my time for everything, and I built the initial plugin, simpler color input, in about 10 hours. It's helpful if you start duplicating the code for a similar plugin. And then there's some helpful resources, Sanity plugin kit, Sanity developing plugins doc, and then I'm happy to be a resource. I know the reason I launched this plugin and got into open source in the first place in the past was because of encouragement and help by other people. So definitely happy to do that. And then to end, here are some other cool Sanity plugins that I use. There are some other custom input ones for like code. There's other color ones, location info, SVGs, rich dates, YouTube, and more. And then just here are some other ones. I just looked through some of my recent projects and pulled these. But that's kind of where I'm going to end. So thanks for listening.
Cool. Let me pull your screen off. Awesome. I actually didn't realize how long you've been like working on this. Like I knew you started it about a year ago, but I didn't realize how much work has been like continued to go into it. But that's really cool. Like the community just kind of like rallied around it and they're like, we're using this. Can you do this for me? But yeah, that's really cool. And we have a couple questions. I
Okay.
have one. Knut has a bunch, but we'll just go through these questions. Oh, Simeon just dropped one in, and I like this one. What plugin are you working on next?
I actually have a couple ideas for other plugins that I have not started or taken the
Okay.
time for because I'm very busy these days, but I should have more free time this summer potentially. But I've been trying to figure out like a simpler way to add like links in my content. And so I don't know entirely what this would look like, but when I'm adding links, it can like allowing, people to add links in Sanity. It can either be like one, like an external link to like google.com or something like that, or it can be like an internal link to like another page or a blog post or whatever. And typically it's like this very complex, I don't know, like field where they have to pick like, oh, external link and then fill in the text or, oh, this. And
Okay.
I'm trying to come up with like a simpler solution personally to use in projects and then maybe have like a plugin that I do for that. I don't know. The other one though is like, so there's like this portable text editor, right? Where you can like bold text, italicize it or whatever. And like all this different stuff. Sometimes I just want to do that on like one of the simple text inputs. Like I just want to italicize like 2 of the words in that. So even making like a smaller, simpler portable text input thing like on one line. That's another one, like idea that
Like
I think.
like in the title field, like
Yeah.
like a
Yeah. Being able
different
to
field completely.
yeah. Yeah. Without like the
Okay.
big box, you know?
Yeah. No, yeah, totally. Well, when you build both of those, let me know and we'll get you back on a meetup.
Okay.
No, those are great ideas. And then I had a question. What's like the next, like, do you have any new features that you want to add to the simpler color input plugin? Like any new ideas that
The only one, honestly, like personally, most of the projects I have are like smaller sites. And so there's not as many like colors for that color list. But just thinking of like projects that do have like more colors, and I guess there are a couple, but just like being able to make like folders or like nested colors rather than having them all like the same. Like I know if you look at some like design systems nowadays, people have like these are like, I don't know, primary colors or secondary or whatever. So being able to click on these folders and see the nested ones, that's the only thing I've thought of that might be helpful. And personally, like there's no issues or requests on the plugin right now. There haven't been, so nothing else that people in the community have requested yet.
Yeah. No, that sounds awesome. And then Knut has a couple questions. Let me try and like condense it. So you talked about like your experience building it and like how it was not that hard. It sounds amazing what you did and it sounds like tough, but is there any like feedback on like making that plugin experience better? Like building a plugin in Sanity, like how could it be better?
Oh, feedback for like Sanity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Honestly, I did not know how to do the annotation thing at all, like in the portable
Okay.
text editor. That took me a long time to figure out. There just wasn't documentation in Sanity for how to do that. I don't know if there were too many examples of other plugins that do it either, but in my mind, I was like, I know there has to be a way to do this. And so I spent a long time figuring out how to make that, like add that so that people could pull it in and use it in their portable text editor. But if there were more resources for that, that would be helpful.
No, that's good feedback. Yeah. Um, we'll make sure that's easier moving forward. But yeah, Alyssa, thank you so much. This was a fantastic talk, and this is a fantastic plugin. Do you could you put the link in the Meetup channel for everyone so that they can go and download it and start using it in their own projects?
I'll do that.
Cool. But other than that, oh wait, we may have one more question. Okay, cool. So there's the link for anyone who wants to go use this plugin. Super awesome, and great job on it. This is a really great plugin. And thanks so much for speaking. And if you all want to find Alyssa, you are in the Slack community, the Sanity Slack community. So hanging out there. Cool. Well, thank you, Alyssa.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, so amazing talk. Everyone go and download that plugin immediately. But yeah, super excited to move on to the next talk. And this one is also an awesome one. But before we do my game question thing, I know you know what to call it, but this one is interesting because it's always like back and forth what people use. But do you use Grok or GraphQL? So I'm going to throw it in the chat. Put the emoji that you use. I'm going to put both in so you can just like kind of vote. Whoops. And yeah, let me know what you are using. Are you using Grok or using GraphQL? I love Grok and I use Grok, but GraphQL is also valid. But yeah, that is our intermission question of the day. Well, there's 3 of them, so that's just one of the 3. Okay, so the next person we have on stage is Emma, and let's bring Emma on stage. Hi, Emma.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And where are you located?
So I'm located in New York City. Yeah, it's a beautiful day today, 75 degrees Fahrenheit.
Nice. And do you use Grok or GraphQL?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this. I love Grok. It's so powerful. There are so many things you can do, and I've personally found some Easter eggs in there as well. So I'm Team Grok for sure.
Nice. I would love to know those Easter eggs. So if you ever want to jot them down in the Slack, we'd love that. Cool. Well, I will give you the stage, and thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. So, yeah, as Cap said, my name is Emma Lebeck Schaefer. I am an artist, an engineer, and a designer. And yeah, I'm based in New York at the moment. And today I'm going to talk about a tool that is very much in progress and moving along. So I've been working with this collective out of Detroit, Michigan, called Bulk Space, and they are in the process of beginning this sort of next phase of their project, which is opening a community space that has many different functions and purposes, but one of those aspects is a media lab for artists and creators, makers of all kinds. And yeah, so I guess this talk that I'll go through here is going to be focused on how I use Sanity to deliver this tool, right, and generally just kind of aid in all of the operations that need to happen for bulk space to do what they do. So I'll talk a little bit first about bulk space. So I've been collaborating with bulk for nearly a year now, but I have connections with a lot of the members of the collective from way back. So we have a nice like rapport. have been communicating and kind of, sharing ideas a lot. So this initial kind of the initial start and onset of this project, it made perfect sense to me to use Sanity, although I think it took some some initial demonstrations to get everyone on board. But yeah, I will speak to Bulk Space's background here. So, like I said, Bulk is an artist-run nonprofit. Um, they're dedicated to uplifting the works of marginalized creatives and taking up physical and digital space. And as an organization, Bulk is dedicated to building platforms for success by way of community conversation, exhibitions, and performance. So, and located in Detroit, Michigan, we can see I have a little Google Earth screenshot here. You can sort of see downtown Detroit in the background here. So located in like the north end, Bulk has great location, very central, easy for people to get to in the city of Detroit. So just a little more kind of a wider view for anyone familiar with the area. This is where Bulk is located. And so they recently opened this space in Detroit, which is beautiful. It has a lot of great light, and so I'm extremely excited for them, and I know they're very excited to continue um, developing this project. And just another couple of photos here of some of the early events that they put on. So here pictured is a screening from the artist Cam Granger, just presenting one of his new films. So that's just a little background about what bulk space is. But really the big question here, maybe I think I have personally after speaking to that, but I'm sure other people share is like, how does this have to do with Sanity? And what exactly is an operations tool? I'm still kind of asking myself this question, as it's somewhat of a vague category, maybe. So let's try to answer that question with this talk, with this presentation. And I'll start here just by talking about the goals and the requirements that we had. So Bulk is starting this project, right? They're starting a media lab, a community space. This is a multifunctional, nebulous operation that's happening, right? But so we had to rein ourselves in at the start of this. So very simply, we tried to list out, okay, what do we want to be able to do, and how can we accomplish that, right? So we have an inventory management solution. So we discussed this, an idea that okay, there will be cameras and printers or 3D scanners, things like this, tools that like the artists today and makers today need to create their artwork or projects that they're interested in. So that's a big one, right? We have to be able to manage inventory. Seems relatively possible with Sanity. Now, another aspect of this is that there's going to need to be a way to track individuals, right? People who are involved with this collective and want to be accessing the inventory items. Okay, so that one might be a little complicated. And so with those two things, we're also going to need to be able to track and set forth an interface for members to access inventory items. And so that's going to look like some kind of a rental system, some kind of a checkout flow. And lastly, something that we're very much still working on, but was definitely an important aspect of this was find a way to add support for robust reporting, usage of this overall application, and a general backlog and history of events. So yeah, enter stage left, screenshot of Sanity Studio. So yeah, we ended up with this portal, which is sort of an internal term we've been referring to the Sanity instance as. So the Media Lab portal allows us to handle all of these questions, these requirements, and yeah. Please allow me to jump into Sanity. We're going to click around for a little while. So yeah, I'm hoping to demonstrate, some key features here that we built into Sanity by way of different customization techniques. And first, I'm going to start in the inventory here. And there's maybe a few things you'll notice as I click through here. The first thing being there appears to be some different kinds of documents here in a single document pane. So what we have here actually are categories, document type of categories, I should say, sitting next to a different kind of document type of item, one of the most vague and potentially nondescript document types that we have in here in the studio. So yeah, so this is one key thing I'd like to talk about. And we'll also take a look at our checkout flow, how we handle this, our list here. And we can also look at how we manage the inventory, right, that we're seeing up here. So first, what I can talk about is this navigation that we've set up using the structure builder. So I mentioned that we have categories alongside items, and this was a challenge, but it also didn't emerge this way. So if I jump into the editor for something in here, let's take a look at the Sony lens. This is a pretty common lens that you might use on a camera. Definitely something you might use for blogging. So a great thing to have in the inventory. But what we see here when we open this document is, aside from a lot of fields that we've organized here into groups, we see we have a taxonomy group here with images, more details, and some general metadata. But let's take a look at taxonomy here. So this is one component that that was built to handle organizing this inventory. So what we see here is an input component that was added to an array field, and that array field contains the potential for adding references to other categories. So how does this happen, and what is this doing? There's so much going on here, and certainly this interface may be a little noisy now that I'm looking at it. But if we're looking at, bring the title back up here, we're looking at editing the Sony lens inventory item, and we're looking at the categories. We can see that we have a checkbox here next to the photo and video category. That makes sense. That's where we found it. We found it in the photo and video category pane here. It's also in lenses, right? Makes sense. This is a lens. So this is a type of taxonomy that that we're using specifically because we want people to be able to explore the entire inventory in a way that gets more and more granular. Um, and so uh, thinking just a little bit ahead and where we want to be with this, we'd like for people to be able to navigate through the entire inventory and see all the products, all the inventory items that are in each category, right? From the top level all the way down to the individual subcategories. So to demonstrate this a little more, we can go back into photo video, jump into cameras, and now we start to see, okay, we are getting more granular here. We have mirrorless cameras, sort of a newer type of camera. We have medium format digital cameras, a very expensive type of camera, and we have point and shoot cameras. So if we look at this list, for those of you who may be interested in and familiar with um, different types of photography gear, you might see that, okay, this Fujifilm camera is actually a medium format digital camera. And because of that, we can see that, sure, it's in the category of medium format digital camera, but realistically, it's also in the category of cameras. And even beyond that, it's also in the category of photo and video. So this is kind of, this is an important aspect of this, and definitely a unique case. I'm certain that other people have come into this pattern before, but I do feel like this is a different way than I've ever approached taxonomy and hierarchy as well. So this is like something we can look at in the code shortly here. But I will also speak to our checkout management system, and that's something that we can close this out and move into now. So generally speaking, the checkout flow functions pretty similarly to any other Sanity document type. So for each individual checkout that we might have, a member might come in and say, hey, I'd really like to check out a digital camera. I'm working on some photography. Yeah, can I reserve that or check it out today? And so in order to create a new checkout here, we can open up, create a new document inside of the checkout document pane here. And because I'm personally a staff member of Bulkspace, I can click that this is a staff checkout. I'll go ahead and select myself here, and we'll use this one. And yeah, so we're seeing already this is a really similar workflow to setting up something like a page or a category. But we have our inventory items here, which is a pretty simple array input. And so I can come in and say, yeah, I wanted to check out a camera. I'm working on my photography. And here's that extremely expensive medium format camera. And great. So today is April 9th. It's currently 12:54 in New York City. And so, yeah, this is looking like everything I might need to just to check this item out. So yeah, for those curious, you might have noticed that we have this little document badge down here that's labeled pending. We also have, excuse me, we have a button here that says begin checkout. And uh, this is normally something that would say publish, right? So this is a custom action that we're using here. And beyond that, we have some more actions in here. We see this reset checkout action. So this is like I was saying, essentially a very um, this is just a very basic and foundational document. But when we start adding customization to it, it begins to get complicated. Um, so I'd like to talk a little bit about how we came to this structure and this implementation. So to do so, I'm going to jump back into my slides and yeah, talk a little bit more about this before we look at the code a little. So we had the specs, we had the requirements, and we were able to put together the basic schema configuration for this rather quickly. You know, we knew what kind of document types we would need. We would need an item for the inventory items. We would need categories to handle their taxonomy. We would need some kind of meta contextual document potentially to handle things like stock. So how many, how many items of a certain type exist, how many cameras of the same kind, right? And there were other questions that emerged really quickly once we started scaffolding this. So of course, like I think there were some early attempts that I had to kind of reinvent the wheel for some of these solutions. But ultimately, I found myself really digging through the Sanity Exchange and searching many times in the Sanity Slack community, trying to find solutions. And thanks to the incredible community at large and the extensive Sanity Exchange list of guides and plugins, we were able to slap together something and get it working pretty quickly. So the first thing that I can look at here is I came across this parent-child taxonomy guide, right, from Simeon at Sanity. So shouts to you for posting this guide, Simeon. It was very helpful for us to get started. So we were thinking about taxonomy here, trying to figure out, what's the best interface for presenting this? I know that we can approach this with, in a number of ways. We can definitely add a parent to a category to start to set up some kind of hierarchy. But ultimately, I'm not sure the interface that comes out of the box for Sanity with respect to that kind of a relationship. I'm not sure that's going to work for people managing the inventory at bulk space. So let's look at like some code snippets here and how we set this up and how this was presented in Simeon's guide, right? So we have our category schema here, pretty simple. Pay no mind to the emoji icon component that we're using here. For the icon, we have our name here, and then we have our parent category field, right? And so, as I mentioned before, we have a reference here to a type of category. So this is a recursive relationship we're seeing, right? Like, at least in principle, you would take a category of cameras, and you might put that category, connect that as a child by way of this parent field to photo and video. We saw that earlier. But if we look back into our interface here, and we come into cameras, we can see that, we're actually able to add new categories to photo video, and we can add new categories to cameras. Well, how do we do that? We do that with initial value templates, right? And that's something that that Simeon's guide speaks to. And I think, I guess this is more of an aside, but the concept of initial value templates and that being available in the Studio Editor holds like an extreme amount of potential, right? Like, there are a lot of different solutions that we can come up with that. So what we see here in this snippet is a very basic new category. It's titled here the category child initial value template. And this gets plugged into the document property in the Sanity configuration, right? So taking a look again at this, what we really needed to figure out was, how do we handle this like recursive functionality of these document panes, right? We've handled creating new documents that have their initial values, but like, if we are in the top level here, how are we going to access all these, right? And so this is one of these the Easter eggs I spoke about earlier. But looking at this fragment, which we came to not only from Simeon's guide, but also from some guides from other members in the Sanity community. We set up this fragment that we can use recursively in our structure builder function. And what this does here is it allows us to take a single projection inside of Grok and reintroduce it as a child projection to the parent. So this is a more of an easy concept, right, to illustrate maybe than it is to explain line by line in this code. But we can take a look and break it down a little, right? So if we're looking for the children categories of a given category, what we could call a parent category, we're just going to look for all of the documents in the content link data set that reference the parent, right? So we're referencing here, this character is referring to the parent category. We're retrieving the ID, and so we're looking for all documents that reference the parent's ID that aren't a draft. So this is potentially something that we would need to change. And so with that, we're including some other fragments here. We're using fields. So this will select all of the fields that we'll need to use for each of the children categories. And then lastly, we get to the recursive aspect of this. So we can introduce this fragment as an argument, right? So that means that any argument that we introduce here, this will continuously get added to the recursive function. So this maybe will better illustrate, right? If we're building a query here and we're filtering for something in the filter, and we're making our first kind of top level projection, what we might have is the photo video category here, and this will have our title in the fields here, and potentially an ID and maybe even a slug. But what we introduce here now is this recursive function, right? The children fragment function gets called, and being passed as the subchildren fragment is the same function. And so what we see here is that we're adding a projection here of children that will select all of the child categories for the filtered parent. And then we're going to also get children for that child category. So these are going to be, if we're using more genealogical terminologies, this is going to be grandchildren categories and great grandchildren categories if we continue. I've stopped the recursion here after I guess this would be 4 generations of categories. But this, this could go on for as long as you'd like. Certainly something to be extremely careful about when it comes to sending queries to the Sanity API. And then lastly, what we do here, this is another Easter egg, Grok Easter egg I wanted to share, and that's the fact that you can do multiple projections on a given array of documents in a response, right? So yeah, I'm just going to plant that one as a seed. I'll let y'all play around with that. So yeah, moving forward, we can see a little more. I'll just demonstrate this a little more and click around to see, how this functions, right? And then we can take a look at the code really quickly. So this aspect I haven't touched on, right, is the fact that we have categories alongside items. We know why we have this, it's, or at least maybe we can assume, right? If we have child categories of these top level categories, and we know that we are going to need to have items from the inventory in a top level category as well as a child category here. We ran into some complications implementing this. If we just look at this first computers and tablets category, we wanted to be able to give editors and maintainers of bulk space this general ability to always dive deeper into the inventory while maintaining the ability to quickly edit a category, right? So without the ability here to dive into without the ability to edit, right, this iPads category, all we really would be able to do is look at all of the iPads. So what we attempted to do, and what I think we're doing pretty successfully here, is we're adding a multi-dimensional kind of a path that we're giving to users here, where where they can kind of move bilaterally, both in an editorial workflow, but also in a more exploratory way. So navigating at the same time they might be editing. And yeah, I guess I can very easily get pulled into more details here, but I do really want to talk about the checkout workflows, though. We can move on to that now. And yeah, if you recall earlier, I had on screen some of the other examples, some of the other plugins and guides that helped us along the way. The big one here that I think demonstrates some of the more dynamic and complex and powerful customizations that are at play in our studio instance is the Sanity workflow plugin. And so what I can actually do here is, I'll bring in the GitHub repository here because I think there are some interesting things to look at, and I'll go ahead and share a link to this in the Slack after I walk through this. But we can see like the general structure of this plugin is really important, right? And when I went about looking at checkouts and how we were going to manage this, there was something I found in this workflow plugin that felt like really foundational. And it started to open a lot of doors for me just in thinking about how am I going to scaffold this. So looking at the schemas that are presented, right, in this Sanity plugin, we have this workflow metadata type. And, I think the first thing I noticed about this was, for one, we're namespacing this document type. And this is something that could be useful for a number of reasons. Like, what if we have, say, a metadata document here that we want to apply to a series of different types, right? So if we have an item, we might want to attribute some metadata to that we can actually store outside of the document. So yeah, I think immediately I saw this and I thought, oh right, like this is another level. Like this could potentially solve some of our problems. And our problems, I mean, our requirements, right? Our requirements for bulk. So how does that tie back into what we have here, right? If we're looking at this pending checkout that we created earlier, there are a number of things that need to get handled, that need to be kept kept track of, right, with this checkout. And this is true of many different checkout flows and inventory systems. So it's not necessarily unique to our case here, but we need to know if the items that we're adding are available. That's important. We need to know what people are involved in this checkout, so we can tie this checkout to users. We need to know a timing situation, right? We need to know when this was checked out, when it should be returned, and when it was actually returned. And then lastly, we need to be able to like take notes, right? We need to leave a paper trail. So let's see what happens, right, when we make changes here. So I'll add a new note, say I'm checking out this camera. It's a beautiful day out, and I want to document the city. Okay, so as a staff member, I'm letting people know, in the future, they can look back on this and say, oh, Emma checked this camera out. Maybe what I should probably do is say, I'm going to return this in, let's say 2 hours. Oops, yeah, I'll say 2 hours from now. So that'll be close to 3 p.m. And now what we have are we have this object. We might be familiar with this, right? We have a portable text field and a date. And this is an object that we're passing into the checkout notes array. So this is all generally like metadata, right? This is all metadata that's associated with a single checkout. So this is kind of like where we're using that form. The checkout becomes not necessarily like a material document inside of the Studio editor, but it's much more nuanced. Like it's more of a nebulous document type that can store information about other document types. And we can see that a little more clearly with the inventory items that are being added here, right? We also manage stock in here inside the studio, and that's something that we initially implemented without with the inventory being stored inside of the item. But one thing we're doing and starting to think about is how can we move something like that into a metadata document? And what would be the benefit of that, right? So sort of maybe just an open question for everyone to think about, and what what we can do with something like a metadata class of document. So yeah, let me speak a little bit more to what we pulled from the workflow plugin, and yeah, I can't underscore enough this plugin. I think everyone should spend a little time today digging around in the source code and seeing what's possible, because a lot is demonstrated with this workflow feature. But what I wanted to talk about kind of last here with the remaining time we have is this workflow, right? This is the checkout flow aspect of the Studio instance. So yeah, in place of a publish button, which we don't really need in our use case, right? Something we've done here is we've added a custom action that we can call begin checkout. But really, this is kind of our replacement for the publish action that allows for different kinds of actions to happen based on the previous state that this checkout was in. And so to demonstrate this a little bit so we can understand what's happening, I have everything in place here to check this out. So if I click begin checkout here, a number of things happen on the screen, right? We have this badge, this document badge gets updated, and our action we just clicked has now changed into something else, right? Now it says process return. And that took a little time, but we can also see that the inventory item that I selected was set to checked out. So yeah, in general, what we can see here is like this workflow. This can happen with the combination of like a number of different customizations that happen. Something that you'll see if you take a look through the workflow plugin, and especially if you start diving into customization in the Sanity documentation, you'll see that each of these individual pieces of the document editor all correspond to customizable components in the studio. And with that, we can customize each item in an array. We can customize document badges, as I said, and we can introduce new workflow actions. So let me just return this item, and we'll see that now we have the item has been returned. And as we await the response in this array item component, we see it's now available for somebody else to be checked out, or for someone else to check this out. So yeah, so I'll kind of just quickly touch on this last thing. It's really a very simple guide that I think that would be very useful for anyone looking at building out a system like we have at Bulk. And that's something you might have noticed earlier, which is just these these different types of lists of checkouts. We have all of them here, all the checkouts here. We have pending checkouts, so uncompleted checkouts, things that are in process. We have hot checkouts, things that are currently checked out. And lastly, we have returned items, or cold checkouts. So this is all possible through dynamic folder structure in the Studio editor. So this is all available to be checked out on the Sanity Exchange, and I highly recommend you check these out. Yeah, some more screenshots here. I know I have to wrap up here soon, so I'm going to move through a little bit and yeah, just touch on this last thing here, which is the reporting aspect that we've included in the Studio editor. There's a lot to be said here, but more than anything, I think it's nice to get a little demo of how something like this works. This is at its base just a Studio tool, custom tool component. And then this allows us to query for live information inside the Studio. From within this tool, we can access the entire data set. We can use apologies. It's something I should put on the screen, but what I'll do is I'll add in the Slack later is a link to the documentation for this. But we're using listen query from the document store. This is a method that allows us to access the document store and receive real-time changes by way of reactive JavaScript. So, you know, say we have this tool open on the screen and one of our editors continues to add additional items to the inventory, we can actually see this inventory value go up, which is pretty cool. So yeah, absolutely recommend checking out some more information on how the document store works. And all of this was made possible through the Sanity Exchange and digging around in some GitHub repositories. So definitely make sure that you check that out. But yeah, I would just like to thank everyone who had me on here. I have recently finished a large refactor to the bulk space Studio instance and code base. And I'll be making that available for people to take a look through the source code after this. So yeah, with that, I will say thank you. Yeah.
Awesome talk, Emma. You don't realize how much like detail, because I've seen like a little bit of this, but it's like, wow, there's a lot going on behind the scenes and a lot of stuff that you've like implemented. This was very, very impressive. Very good work. This is great. I do have a question. It actually came from Canute, but I will also kind of like do a follow-up. Let me read what he wrote, and then I will tack on what I have to say. So you mentioned at the beginning, it took some convincing for them to agree to Sanity. What was like the thing that made them have the green light and like the thumbs up? And then my follow-up, are they happy with it? Like, are they like, wow, this is like exactly what we wanted?
Yeah, great questions. You know, it was interesting. I think the beginning of this process like started with me and the members of Bulkspace looking at potential alternative solutions. You know, there are a number of services that offer inventory management, checkout processes, all these things. But in an early conversation with the collective that we were doing over Zoom, I was able to like start up a new Sanity instance. In the conversation we were having, start to scaffold out what the inventory system might look like, all within the space of like an hour and a half, maybe. So I think it was generally the agility and the speed at which we could like take feedback and turn it into, a visual working example. That was a big thing that sold them on Sanity.
That's really cool. Yeah, and I mean, you made magic with it. So congrats, kudos. Looks great.
Thank you.
But yeah, and you said you were going to drop a couple links in the chat. So we'll wait on those. But thank you, Emma, so much. And if you all want to find Emma, Emma is in the Slack community. So yeah, thank you so much for your talk.
Thank you.
All right, so we have 2 amazing community talks finished, and we're so grateful to Emma and Alyssa for their work and presenting today. We're very grateful for it. So Emma and Alyssa, keep an eye out in your messages. I will be sending you a link to swag. So we got some pretty cool swag this year. And if you'd like to be a speaker at a future meetup, reach out to me and we can get that set up. We are always looking for speakers. So I will bring on our last speaker to help me with this last question. Hi, Knut.
Hello. Will I get swag too?
No.
Well, I have.
You can get swag. Yeah, there. You already have
swag
it
already. Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
so I have one more break question. Oh, let me put up the banner so people know where to find the chat. So we've had what emoji describes sanity to you? Then we had Grok or GraphQL. The question for this intermission or this break, what do you call it? This is an intermission. This, yeah, whatever it is your studio, and I noticed because Emma was in dark and light mode a lot. Is your studio currently in light theme or dark theme? And I'll put that in the chat. So let's do a sun for light and just vote. And then we'll do a moon for dark. The moon emoji is like a sun.
If you have asked yesterday, I made sure to like put the studio in dark mode exactly when that clips happened, and then back to light mode again.
Okay. So you use both.
I think I used the system settings. So like whenever in the evening, if I happen to be in the studio, it will just switch to dark mode.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I use light a lot lately. I think if it turns
you
to
know
dark,
what?
I'll make it light.
I'm not sure if we actually told people about this, but now we're storing your settings server side. So if you put your studio in dark mode and open the studio up in another, like on your phone or something, it will still be in dark mode. It's like the pref follows the user.
That's nice. That's good. Okay, so your talk is on Sanity and TypeScript, and we're very excited for this. I will give you the stage.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Right. Let's do it. Right. Hello, everyone. For those of you who were in Oslo a couple of weeks ago, you might have seen this talk already, but I thought I could do it again for the virtual audience. Also, apologies if I'm being incoherent. I'm so jet lagged. I just came to California from Norway, so hopefully this will make sense. But yeah, just shout at me in the chat if this doesn't if I'm not making sense anymore. But yeah, okay. So I want to talk about Sanity, TypeScript, and you. And before heading into that, I should present myself. I'm Knut. I lead the developer education and community team here at Sanity. And yeah, TypeScript. Let's talk about TypeScript. Why are we talking about TypeScript? It's easy to kind of become this guy. I feel like when you start to talk about TypeScript, but I will try to avoid that. But as some of you might know, TypeScript makes kind of like JavaScript type safe-ish, So JavaScript is a dynamic language. You don't have to say, oh, this is a string and oh, this is a number. Like JavaScript kind of just handles that for you behind the scenes. But that's not always awesome because it's easy to make mistakes. That has to do with how you treat data types. So TypeScript is kind of like a superset, like a thing you add to JavaScript to make it type safe-ish. And that gives you kind of like better developer experience, not only because it catches kind of like bugs that you might introduce, but it also gives you autocomplete and tooltips and so on if you are, for example, in Visual Code Editor. Another thing that's nice is that we can use this TS-doc convention to give inline documentation. So like for the Studio APIs, we have started to also publish reference docs with TS-docs. You get that both in the code editor, but also you can also go to the documentation reference site to explore that. And I would argue that TypeScript also makes it's great for collaboration in teams because it's easier to understand what the code does and what the intention with different things is. Like, what is this function supposed to return and so on. And yeah, it probably makes you more hireable. I keep seeing TypeScript being somewhat of a requirement for jobs. So it might be a good thing to start learning. And yeah, it creates some new opportunities for bike shedding and yak shaving, shaving and yak shedding. I'm not sure, but yeah, TypeScript is here to stay for sure. And yeah, it is kind of becoming like an industry standard in a way. Like Next.js have started to ship with TypeScript by default. You see the curve is going up. I don't think it will decline anytime soon. So to sum it up, like TypeScript is awesome for a lot of things, and sometimes it's not. It's important to acknowledge that. Sometimes TypeScript error handling isn't the most helpful, but hopefully that is something that will improve as well as we go. All right. So we're here to talk about TypeScript and Sanity. So let me first start with kind of like what was the issue here that we tried to solve. If you look in this is closed now, but like if you look, let's see, like 2020, that's like 4 years ago. In April 2020, like jokingly, it was the highest concern that we like don't have like an official way to generate TypeScript types, which like you can notice when we used Gatsby here, and this user on GitHub is coming with a very reasonable request. Hey, can we just generate these types when I'm consuming the Sanity content in this Gatsby front end? So yeah, very kind of like a very popular feature request, and yeah, very reasonable. That takes us to the schema, because as most of you are familiar with, like how you can like design and construct the studio is your right schema. You make document types and fields. And if you look at this, that is kind of like typing your content, right? Oh, title is a string. This thing is a boolean, and so on. So you're kind of ascribing types to these different things, and that kind of like becomes JSON data when editors are working in the studio. And that's the thing. This schema, it's only for the studio. So Content Lake doesn't really know about this schema except from how the data ends up looking in the JSON, right? So that is kind of like a challenge. Like we have to think about like what does this mean for the content you're consuming. And then there's this. As like kind of like the previous talk talked about, like Grok is a very flexible system. So what you have to do is to kind of like manually type whatever came out of the Grok query, And like, who has time for that? Like, you already typed it in the studio. Feels kind of like redundant that you have to type it again in your front end, right? And if you change something in studio, you have to kind of change it in front end. It's kind of like a bit laborious. So yeah. And you would think that this would be easy, right? To solve, because GraphQL has it. Like, GraphQL is awesome. It has GraphQL codegen. You can just run that against the GraphQL schema and get TypeScript types out, right? But yeah, Grok is a different animal, because you can actually change the data types within the query. And you can do really wild things. And so when we kind of are comparing these things, it's a bit like comparing apples to oranges kind of thing. And it's not always obvious, because Grok in some ways looks fairly similar to GraphQL, right? So the reason we invented Grok in the first place is when back in, I think it was 2016, like GraphQL was almost all just published as a public project. If you look at GraphQL, it's more like an API pattern. It's more like replacing RESTful APIs and so on. It's not actually, we would argue, a query language. Grok is actually a query language. And the way I try to frame this often is to like think about Grok as an alternative REST, whereas GraphQL is an alternative REST, and then Grok is more like SQL for JSON. So it's more a lower level thing. And like, you might not know this, but like, if you use Sanity's GraphQL API, what that resolves to on the server is actually Grok queries. So we're translating your GraphQL request to Grok queries underneath the hood. So we obviously have some clever folks on staff that makes query languages. So why did this take us this long to ship? And it's not that much about implementation as deciding how this API should look like, right? Figuring out how should null handling work, and like, you have previews. So like, a Grok query might return draft data, and that might be required in the schema, but you might not have a value for it yet. So like, there are a lot of these decisions that we have to make, and we are making them for a lot of people, and we have to kind of stick with those decisions for a while. So that often explains, if it takes us a while to kind of get stuff that seems obvious, that might be the case. Like, we have to decide stuff. And there are some giant shoulders that we kind of deserve some credit for the solution we ended up on. First of all, it's Sanity codegen. This was kind of like the first elaborate effort to bring TypeScript generation to Sanity content. And Enrico did a pretty awesome job doing this for Sanity V2, Sanity Studio V2. The only problem was that we ended up hiring him, and then Enrico had to work on other stuff. So we never got to kind of finish Sanity code again properly and bring it over to Studio V3. And then we have GrokD, which is kind of like a different approach. So it uses kind of like, it builds on something called SOD that also brings like TypeScript to runtime validation. And it has kind of this query builder pattern. And they have shipped like a lot of tooling for this. Like there's like a GrokD playground and so on. So this was kind of like another great kind of like approach to kind of like bring TypeScript types to the front end. And then of course, Sanity Typed, awesome project is as well. Pretty mind-blowing, because this is kind of like a solution that is implemented in TypeScript. So like here, TypeScript is used to generate TypeScript types, which is kind of like brings you a lot of like real-time developer experience advantages, but it's also hard to scale, because like once you have like pretty complex schemas and Grok queries and so on, you are relying on TypeScript kind of like garbling through all of these things, and TypeScript wasn't kind of built support that. So we found it a bit hard to scale for more complex projects. But that being said, all of these projects super important for us, very inspirational, and they will continue to be valid and hopefully continue to be kind of like take advantage from what we shipped as well. So, all right. Are you ready to get out of the unknown? There's a little TypeScript joke here. Yes, we're introducing Sanity TypeGen. And what this is kind of three things. So first of all, it is an extraction of the a static representation of the schema. So now we have an official way to say, here's the schema implemented in JavaScript or TypeScript. And then we can generate like a JSON static representation of that schema with some attributes. And you can use this for not only TypeScript generation, but like other plugins and so on might have use for this. So like GrokD, for example, are looking at this to kind of like being able to delete some code that I have to do to infer the schema, right? So here we have an example of how this also kind of like supports the community TypeScript efforts. And here we can see that it's like we have the JSON representation of the JavaScript schema. And then we have the second part of this, which is generating types from the studio schema. So when you run the typegen command in your CLI, it looks at your schema, the schema section, and then it generates types out of that. So like then you get kind of like the TypeScript types that matches your schema types, and that can be useful for like if you're doing studio customization on plugins and so on, where you know that kind of like the schema type represents the document one to one, right? So there's no grok between. It's like the raw document matches kind of like the schema type. And that looks kind of like this. So here we have like a post schema type, TypeScript type. There's a lot of types now, but anyways. And then the third, which is kind of like the icing on the cake, if you want, is to generate types for grok query results. And the results part here is important. And to do that, we have some requirements. So first of all, your grok queries has to be assigned to a variable, and that variable has to have a globally unique name within your project. And then there has to be a syntactically valid grok expression. So like whatever you're assigning to that variable has to be able to, you have to be able to kind of run it in Vision, for example, without kind of like getting an error message that there is a syntax error. Then you have to use the grok template literal. So that's kind of like the thing you can import from the grok npm package, which is kind of like, it's just a very small function that makes it possible for VS Code, for example, to kind of like parse the grok query and give it syntax and highlighting. But we're also using this to say like, hey, this is a grok query that I want to have included in my typegen generation. And when you do this, when you do this and run the TypeScript typegen generation, it will kind of like include those queries. And here you can see that I'm running it on the Sanity website repository, and you get like a lot of errors here. And that's kind of, I included this as like it's like a feature, because if you have like a mature project, you weren't aware of these requirements, so the CLI will kind of tell you that, hey, I tried to do this with this thing, but it's not syntactically valid. So that gives you the opportunity to fix that. It will still come like do the types for whatever queries are compatible and so on. So you're not blocked by this, but you can kind of gradually get the project up to speed. And the type for a grok query result kind of looks like this. And you can see that this is a fairly complex query, so it's able to handle complexity as well. And here we have kind of like the whole workflow. I've used npm scripts here to kind of like do the schema extraction and type gen in like one go, because if you change your schema, you kind of want to probably regenerate that schema and so on. And yeah, it's pretty neat. It feels pretty awesome to kind of just get these TypeScript types automatically and use them in your project. So yeah, most of Grok is imported, and we are still adding functions, support for more functions. You can go to our docs to see what's kind of like what Grok is supported by this by now. Unsupported expressions becomes unknown in your types. So then you can manually go in and type them if you are interested. And we're also using telemetry to understand like what are supported and how frequent is it, so we can like bring that support and prioritize correctly. And yeah, that's mostly it. So Sanity TypeGen is available in beta now. You can go and install it by installing the latest studio updates in whatever package manager you're using this week. Of course, you go to docs to read about it. We also published a new course on Sanity Learn that is about TypeScript generation, that is more kind of like step-by-step, holding your hand kind of thing. And it's in beta because we want to learn if it works for you, and if it doesn't work for you, why, and if there are things you wish were better. And we already have gotten a lot of feedback in the TypeScript channel in Slack, and we welcome more feedback as we go on. So very appreciated everyone who has kind of like given us some feedback on this. And I also wanted to thank the engineering team and the product team who have worked a lot on this. Of course, a lot of folks at Sanity has had opinions and so on, but yeah, these people kind of like actually brought this out. It's super awesome. But yeah, I have one more thing. And I was like, not sure if I should kind of tell you this yet, but we are working on it. I would be very surprised if it doesn't happen. But yeah, Grok fragments, or whatever we call them, they are coming. So I know that some of you will be very stoked about this. Yeah, so this is a work we are doing on improving Grok and improving the developer experience on Grok. And yeah, it will be very exciting to be able to talk about this more in the future. And that's all. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Knut. There's no questions, but there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of like, this is awesome. This is exciting. And I saw that photo of you with the Franz Kafka t-shirt. That was awesome.
Yeah. Those I played in the band before I became whatever I am now. Yeah. Right. Was it comprehensible?
Yes, very good.
Is comprehensible a word even? I'm not sure anymore.
Well, the chat liked it. The chat was all about it. So yes.
Awesome.
Everyone comprehensibled it.
But yeah, I also just want to say, like, we know that like there's some nil behavior and required fields and so on. Also for GraphQL, like we know about it. It's something we are thinking about. But yeah. Yeah, it was tough to follow those talks though. But yeah.
They were great. But you were also great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. That's
cool.
it.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna end the meetup. Do you wanna join me in ending the meetup?
Sure.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for joining. We really appreciate it. We do these about every month and a half. So keep an eye on email or our socials or whatever for our next one. It will be May 21st. May 21st. So keep an eye out for links. And we are also hiring for a bunch of roles. So if you want, definitely head on over. I'm going to put the link in the chat. Definitely go check out those open positions. And you look like you were going to say something.
Yeah. The May 8th.
Oh yeah,
We have a
You
huge
do-
event coming.
yeah. You talk about that one. I'll get the.
Well, okay. So yeah, we are putting on kind of like once in a while we have like these huge product events where we announce exciting new stuff and talk about where we are at as a company and so on. And we have one coming up in just about exactly a month, I guess, May 8th. You'll find links to this on our website, probably in the Slack in a couple of seconds or something. But yeah,
Yep.
do sign up for that. And also important to say that this isn't just like a developer event, it's also for developers, but it's kind of like for anyone who might use Sanity or would want to use Sanity. They might not even know that I want to use Sanity yet, but they can come and kind of learn something. So yeah. Do this is the thing to attend.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put it in the chat. It's just sanity.io/sanity-connect. And then I'm going to also put in the link where you can just go to find out more about our next meetup. It's always going to be a developer deep dive. But yeah, good catch on that May 8th one. And anything else? I think that's it for me. Cool. Well, thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks.
And thank you to Alyssa and Emma and Knut for your awesome talks. And we will see you all around.
All right.